Commander Thelvex had seen many worlds in his 200 cycles of service. He had watched gas giants birth new moons. He had mapped the crystal forests of Valoris Prime. He had even witnessed the death of a star from the safety of his ship, but nothing in his long career had prepared him for what his sensors were telling him now. The scout ship Whisper of Stars drifted silently through an uncharted region of the galaxy. This arm of the spiral had been marked as empty, dead, a cosmic wasteland where no intelligent life could possibly exist. The nearest inhabited system was over 3,000 light-years away. No species had ever bothered to explore this far into the void, and yet the sensors were screaming. Radio waves. Thousands of them. Millions of them. They poured from a single point in space like water from a broken dam. Chaotic. Overlapping. Completely without order. Thelvex adjusted his eye stalks and leaned closer to the display screen. His pale blue skin flickered with confusion. A natural response his species could not control. Run the analysis again, he ordered his second officer. Keela, a young female with silver markings across her face, worked the controls. Her 4 fingers danced across the panel. The results came back the same. Confirmed, Commander. The signals are artificial. They carry structured information, music, speech, mathematical patterns. They are coming from the 3rd planet of this star system. Thelvex felt his hearts beat faster. Both of them. This was impossible. This region of space was supposed to be lifeless. The Galactic Council had declared it so 10,000 cycles ago. No patrol had ever been sent here. No survey had ever been conducted. The galaxy was vast, and resources were limited. Why explore nothing? But something was here. Something that should not exist. Set course for the source, Thelvex commanded, and send a message to the Council. Tell them we have found a new species. Pre-FTL, broadcasting on primitive radio frequencies. The Whisper of Stars moved through the darkness like a ghost. It made no sound. It left no trace. The ship's stealth systems were the best in the fleet. Whatever lived on that distant world would never know it was being watched. As they drew closer, the planet came into view. It was small, blue and green and white. Swirls of cloud covered parts of its surface. A single large moon orbited around it, gray and dead. Thelvex felt a strange sensation in his chest. The planet was beautiful, fragile, like a jewel floating in the black. Deploy observation drones, he said quietly. I want full spectrum analysis. Biological, technological, social structure, everything. 12 drones launched from the ship. They were tiny things, no bigger than a human fist. They scattered across the planet like seeds in the wind. Some descended into the atmosphere. Others took position in orbit. They began recording. Thelvex waited. He had done this many times before. First contact with a new species was always exciting, but it was also predictable. Every civilization followed the same pattern. They started as tribes. They formed nations. They unified under a single government. They developed technology. They reached for the stars. The process took thousands of cycles, but it always looked the same in the end. The first drone reports came back. Thelvex read them with interest. Then he read them again. Then he called Keela over to check if the drones were functioning correctly. They were. This cannot be right, he whispered. The planet did not have one civilization. It had hundreds. They were divided by invisible lines drawn on maps. They spoke different languages, thousands of different languages. They had different beliefs about the universe, different systems of government, different ways of organizing their societies. They were not unified. They were scattered, broken, fighting among themselves like children. And yet they had technology. They had split the atom. They had built machines that could think. They had sent members of their species to walk on their own moon. They had created networks of information that spanned their entire world. All of this while remaining divided. All of this while waging wars against each other. Thelvex called for more data. The drones delivered. Each report was more confusing than the last. These creatures called themselves humans. They lived short lives, barely a single cycle by Valorian standards. They knew they would die, and yet they still built things meant to last forever. They created art that served no practical purpose. They wrote stories about things that never happened. They organized sounds into patterns they called music, and they would sit for hours just listening. They kept animals in their homes. Not for food, for companionship. They had taken wolves, dangerous predators with sharp teeth, and over generations turned them into loyal friends. They called them dogs. They loved them. They poisoned their own air and water with their industries. At the same time, they planted forests and protected endangered creatures. They built weapons capable of destroying their entire world. They also built hospitals to save lives. The same species that invented the bomb also invented the vaccine. Thelvex had seen strange things in his travels. He had encountered species that communicated through color. He had met beings that existed as pure energy. He had documented civilizations built entirely underground. But he had never seen anything like this. He had never seen a species at war with itself and still reaching for the stars. He sent his report to the Galactic Council. The response came quickly. The xenosociologists wanted more data. They believed there had been an error. No species could function like this. It went against every model of civilizational development. A society this divided should have destroyed itself long ago. Thelvex looked at the blue planet on his screen. The humans were still broadcasting their signals into space. Music and news and advertisements and cries for help. Joy and sorrow and anger and hope, all mixed together. All at once. There is no error, he said to himself. They are exactly what they appear to be. He did not know if that was wonderful or terrifying. Perhaps it was both. The whisper of stars held its position in the darkness. The drones continued their work. And far below, on the surface of a world that should not exist, 7 billion humans went about their lives. They fell in love. They fought wars. They created and destroyed. They dreamed of the stars without knowing that the stars were already watching. The first contact had been made. But Thelvex understood that this was only the beginning. The Galactic Council would want answers. They would want to know how this impossible species had survived. They would want to know what to do about them. Commander Thelvex had no answers. He had only questions, and a growing feeling that the galaxy would never be the same again. Ambassador Kethri sat alone in her study on the orbital station above Valoris Prime. The walls were made of living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Outside her window, 3 moons hung in the purple sky. It was peaceful here. Quiet. A good place to think. But Kethri could not find peace. Not today. Not with the files spread across her desk. She had been chosen by the Unified Worlds to compile the official assessment of the newly discovered species. It was supposed to be simple work. Every few centuries, scouts found a new civilization. The process was always the same. Gather data, analyze patterns, write a report, move on. The humans were different. Kethri picked up her tablet and scrolled through the information for the 100th time. Her large, dark eyes moved across the screen. Her thin fingers trembled slightly. She had been a diplomat for 300 cycles. She had negotiated treaties between species that breathed fire and species that lived in ice. She had seen wonders and horrors beyond counting. Nothing had prepared her for Earth. The data made no sense. The humans had no hive mind. They could not share thoughts or memories. Each one of them was completely alone inside their own head. They could not feel what others felt. They could not know what others knew. They had to use crude sounds and symbols to communicate. Words. Language. It was slow and clumsy and full of misunderstanding, and yet they had built a civilization. Many civilizations, all at the same time. Kethri read about their history. It was violent. Wars upon wars upon wars. They killed each other over land, over resources, over ideas, over the color of their skin, over which invisible god they worshipped. Millions had died. Billions. The numbers were staggering, but the violence was not the strange part. Many species were violent in their early stages. That was normal. Expected. The strange part was what came after. The humans did not stay enemies. They forgave. They rebuilt. They created alliances with the same nations they had tried to destroy. They sent food and medicine to people who had been their enemies just years before. They remembered the dead, mourned them, and then reached out their hands in friendship. How? Kethri could not understand. Her species held grudges for centuries. The Manthari never forgave anyone for anything. The Silith simply consumed their enemies. But humans seemed to believe that yesterday did not have to determine tomorrow. They had a word for it. Hope. She moved on to their technology. This section made even less sense. They had discovered nuclear fission. They had built weapons that could destroy cities in a single flash. They had used these weapons, twice, against each other. The reports included images of the aftermath. Kethri had to stop reading for a moment. The destruction was total, absolute, and then they had stopped. They could have built more bombs. They could have destroyed themselves completely. Every predictive model said they should have. Species that developed nuclear weapons before achieving global unity always destroyed themselves. It was a law of civilizational development, as certain as gravity, but the humans had looked at their terrible weapons and made a choice. No more. Not again. They still built the bombs. They pointed them at each other, but they did not use them. For 80 cycles, they had lived with the power to end everything, and they had chosen not to. Kethri wrote in her notes, "Species displays unprecedented restraint. Reason unknown." She continued reading. The humans had sent members of their species to their moon. This alone would have been impressive. Reaching beyond your home world was a major milestone for any civilization, but the way they did it was insane. Their computers at the time were primitive, less powerful than the toys their children played with today. Their rockets were crude metal tubes filled with explosive fuel. The margin for error was almost zero. The astronauts who made the journey knew they might die. They went anyway. Why? Glory? Curiosity? Because it was there? The humans had a phrase: one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Kethri did not fully understand it, but she felt something when she read it. Something strange, something that made her hearts beat faster. She found files on human art. This confused her most of all. Art served no survival function. It did not provide food or shelter or protection. It was useless by any practical measure, and yet humans devoted enormous resources to it. They painted pictures, they carved stone, they wrote stories about things that never happened and would never happen. They created music, organized patterns of sound that existed only to make other humans feel emotions. Kethri listened to some of the music. She did not have human ears. She could not hear it the way they did, but something in the patterns touched her. There was joy in some pieces, sorrow in others, hope and despair and love and loss, all woven together in waves of sound. These creatures were dying, every single one of them. Their lives lasted barely 100 cycles. They knew this. They watched their parents grow old and die. They watched their friends fall. They knew that one day they too would stop existing. And instead of giving up, instead of collapsing into despair, they made music. They painted sunsets. They wrote poems about love that would not last. It was beautiful. It was heartbreaking. It was impossible. Kethri finished her report late in the night cycle. She marked the file with a designation that had not been used in 10,000 cycles. Requires council review, species defies modeling. She added a personal note at the end. It was not professional. It was not proper. But she could not help herself. I have studied 17,000 species in my career. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have documented wonders that would take lifetimes to describe, but I have never encountered anything like humanity. They are broken and whole at the same time. They are cruel and kind in the same breath. They know they will die and they choose to love anyway. Every logic says they should not exist, and yet they do. They do not just survive. They reach. They dream. They hope. I do not know what to make of them. I do not know if they are a threat or a miracle. Perhaps they are both. But I know this much. The galaxy has never seen anything like them, and I suspect it never will again. She sent the report to the Galactic Council. Then she sat in the darkness of her study and watched the moons move slowly across the sky. Somewhere out there, impossibly far away, 7 billion humans were waking up and going to sleep. They were fighting and loving and creating and destroying. They were living their short, bright lives, and for the first time in 300 cycles, Ambassador Kethri felt something she had almost forgotten: wonder. The crystalline moon of Ascendance hung in the darkness between two dying stars. It was an ancient place, the oldest place in the known galaxy. Here, 10,000 cycles ago, the first species to achieve faster-than-light travel had built a monument to cooperation, a great hall where all intelligent beings could gather as equals. The Galactic Council had met here ever since. Today, the hall was full. Representatives from 12 elder species sat in their designated chambers. The Valorians were there, their blue skin glowing softly in the dim light. The Manthari clicked their mandibles impatiently. their insect-like bodies rigid with tension. The Scythe floated in tanks of purple liquid, their tentacles pressing against the glass. Dozens of others filled the remaining seats, beings of light and stone and living metal, species that breathed methane and species that needed no air at all. At the center of the hall stood a holographic display. It showed a small blue planet spinning slowly in the void. Earth, the source of so much confusion. Elder Vex of the Menthari spoke first. His voice was sharp, like metal scraping against metal. We have read the reports. We have analyzed the data. Our position is clear. This species must be quarantined. Murmurs rippled through the hall. They are too dangerous, Vex continued. Too unpredictable. They wage war against their own kind. They have created weapons capable of destroying their entire world. They poison their environment while pretending to save it. They cannot even agree on basic facts. They argue about everything. Science, history, morality. They have no unity, no direction, no stability. The Silith representative, a being called Moro, extended a tentacle toward the display. And yet they have not destroyed themselves. Your own models predicted extinction within 3 generations of discovering nuclear weapons. It has been 80 cycles. They are still here. A temporary delay, Vex insisted. They will fall eventually. All divided species do. We should isolate them now, before they develop faster than light technology, before they can spread their chaos to the rest of the galaxy. Isolate them how? Asked the Valorian ambassador. They are already reaching beyond their world. They have sent machines to other planets in their system. They have landed robots on distant moons. Given time, they will develop the technology to leave their star system. We cannot build a wall around them forever. Vex's mandibles clicked faster. Then we eliminate the threat permanently. Silence fell over the hall. Even for the Manthari, this was extreme. You suggest genocide, Morrow said quietly. The destruction of an entire species. I suggest survival, Vex replied. Ours. Have you read the military analysis? These humans invented organized warfare before they invented writing. They have been fighting each other for their entire existence. If they ever unite, if they ever turn their violent nature outward, they could threaten everything we have built. The debate continued for hours. Some species agreed with the Manthari. The humans were too dangerous, too volatile. Better to end the threat now than risk catastrophe later. Others argued for observation. Perhaps the humans would destroy themselves. Perhaps they would evolve past their violent phase. Time would tell, but no one spoke in favor of contact. Then a new voice filled the hall. It was old, ancient, like the sound of stars being born and dying at the same time. You are all looking at this wrong. Every eye turned toward the smallest chamber in the hall. It was dark, almost invisible. No one had sat there in 1,000 cycles. But now something moved in the shadows. Something vast and slow and impossibly old. Oryx, the last of the founders, emerged into the light. The founders had built this very hall. They had been the first to master faster-than-light travel. They had guided the young species of the galaxy toward cooperation, and then, one by one, they had faded away. Oryx was the last, the final remnant of an age long past. Oryx was not like the others. Its body was made of something that was not quite matter. It shifted and flowed like liquid light. 2 points of brightness served as eyes, burning with knowledge accumulated over millions of cycles. You debate whether to fear them or ignore them, Oryx said. You miss the point entirely. The question is not what we should do about the humans. The question is how they exist at all. The ancient being moved toward the holographic display. Earth spun beneath its gaze. Every model predicts that species like them should fail. Division leads to conflict. Conflict leads to destruction. A species that cannot unify cannot survive long enough to reach the stars. This is not opinion. This is mathematical certainty. It has been proven across 10,000 worlds over millions of cycles. Oryx paused. The light of its eyes dimmed for a moment, as if remembering something painful. I have watched species rise and fall since before your ancestors crawled from their oceans. I have seen empires that spanned galaxies crumble into dust. I have witnessed horrors and wonders beyond your comprehension, and I tell you this: the humans should not exist. By every law of civilizational development, they should have destroyed themselves long ago. And yet here they are, still fighting, Still building. Still reaching. What are you saying? Morrow asked. I am saying that they have something we do not understand. Some quality that defies our models. They look at death and laugh. They know they will fail and try anyway. They fight among themselves constantly. But when threatened from outside, they unite with a speed that should be impossible. Oryx turned to face the council. Its light pulsed brighter. You want to quarantine them because they are dangerous. You are right. They are dangerous. More dangerous than any species I have ever encountered. But not for the reasons you think. They are dangerous because they refuse to give up. Because they weaponize hope. Because they look into the darkness and say, not today. That is not a threat to be eliminated. That is a mystery to be understood. The hall was silent. Even Vex had stopped clicking his mandibles. What do you suggest we do? The Valorian ambassador asked. Oryx was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was softer, almost sad. Watch them. Learn from them. And perhaps, in time, ask them how they do it. How they survive when every logic says they should fall. Because one day, the rest of us may need to know. The ancient being began to fade back into the shadows. The humans are not a problem to be solved. They are a question to be answered. And I suspect the answer will change everything. Oryx disappeared. The council sat in stunned silence. And on the holographic display, Earth continued to spin. Small and blue and impossible. The debate would continue. But something had shifted. Something fundamental. The question was no longer what to do about humanity. The question was what humanity could teach them. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere like a falling leaf. Silent. Invisible. Ambassador Kethri watched through the viewport as clouds parted around her. Below, a human city spread across the landscape. Towers of glass and steel reached toward the sky. Vehicles moved through streets like blood cells through veins. Millions of lives, all pressed together in one small space. She should not be here. The council had not authorized direct contact. They were still debating. Still arguing about quarantine and observation and 100 other options. But Kethri had read the reports too many times. She had studied the data until her eyes ached. She needed to see for herself. She needed to understand. The shuttle landed in a park on the edge of the city. Trees surrounded the clearing. Birds sang in the branches. Kethri activated her shimmer field, a technology that bent light around her body. To human eyes, she would appear as nothing more than a faint ripple in the air, like heat rising from hot pavement. She stepped outside and took her first breath of Earth's air. It was thick, wet, full of strange smells, pollen and exhaust and something sweet she could not identify. Her body adjusted quickly. The Valorians had evolved to survive in many environments. Kethri walked toward the city. She moved slowly, carefully, watching everything. Humans passed her on the sidewalk. They did not see her. They were too busy looking at small glowing rectangles in their hands. Phones, she remembered. Portable computers they used to communicate. She observed them for hours. A mother pushed a small child in a wheeled device. The child laughed at nothing. Pure joy bubbling up from somewhere inside. Two elderly humans sat on a bench, holding hands, watching the sunset. Their skin was wrinkled, their hair white. They would die soon. They knew this, and yet they smiled at each other with such tenderness that Kethri had to look away. A young human male noticed the shimmer in the air where she stood. He squinted at the distortion. Kethri froze. This was it. The moment she had feared. Discovery. Panic. Everything would fall apart. The human shrugged and went back to his phone. She released a breath she did not know she was holding. Days passed. Kethri moved through the city like a ghost. She watched humans work and play and fight and love. She saw them argue over small things and come together over large ones. A building caught fire one night. Strangers rushed to help. They pulled people from the flames. They gave water and blankets to those who had lost everything. No one asked for payment. No one expected reward. They simply helped because help was needed. Why? Kethri could not understand. These humans did not know each other. They had no biological connection, no shared hive mind, no reason to risk their own safety for strangers, and yet they did. She visited a hospital. She watched doctors work through the night to save lives. She saw nurses hold the hands of dying patients so they would not be alone. She observed families gather in waiting rooms, strangers united by shared fear and hope. When good news came, they cried with joy. When bad news came, they held each other and wept. She visited a school. Children sat in rows, learning about mathematics and history and literature. They were so young, so small, and yet their teachers treated them with patience and care, planting seeds of knowledge that might take decades to bloom. Education was not efficient. It did not produce immediate results, but the humans invested in it anyway, believing in a future they might never see. On the 15th day, Kethri made a decision. She lowered her shimmer field in front of a single human, an older male with kind eyes and gray hair. He was sitting alone in the park, reading a book. He looked up. He saw her. His eyes went wide. "Hello," Kethri said. Her translation implant rendered the words in his language. The human stared. His mouth opened and closed. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Well," he said, "I always knew we weren't alone out there." He did not run. He did not scream. He simply closed his book and patted the empty space on the bench beside him. "Sit down," he said. "You look like you have questions." Kethri sat. They talked for hours. She asked about everything: human history, human culture, human nature. The man, whose name was Thomas, answered as best he could. He did not pretend that humans were perfect. He spoke honestly about their wars, their cruelty, their capacity for destruction. "Then why do you keep going?" Kethri asked. "You know you will fail. You know you will die. Everything you build will crumble eventually. Why try at all?" Thomas thought for a long moment. The sun was setting. Orange light painted the clouds. "Because trying is the point," he said finally. "We don't do things because we're guaranteed to succeed. We do them because they matter. Love matters, even if it ends. Art matters, even if it fades. Kindness matters, even if it's forgotten. The doing is what makes us human, not the outcome." Kethri felt something shift inside her, a door opening to a room she had never seen. "You are terrifying," she said quietly. "Do you know that? Your entire species. You should not exist. Every model, every prediction, every logical analysis says you should have destroyed yourselves long ago. And yet here you are, still fighting, still hoping, still reaching for something better." Thomas laughed. It was a warm sound, full of life. "Yeah," he said. "We get that a lot. But here's the thing about humans. We're stubborn. Too stubborn to quit. Too stubborn to accept that the odds are against us. Someone tells us something is impossible, and we take it as a challenge." He looked up at the darkening sky. Stars were beginning to appear. "We've always looked up there and wondered what was waiting for us. Guess now we know." Kethri stayed on Earth for another 10 days. She talked to more humans. She listened to their stories. She laughed at their jokes and cried at their sorrows. She watched them create beauty from nothing and pull hope from despair. When she finally returned to her shuttle, she carried something new with her. Not data, not analysis, something deeper, something that could not be measured or quantified. Understanding. The humans were not a problem to be solved. They were not a threat to be eliminated. They were something far more remarkable. They were survivors, dreamers, stubborn fools who refused to give up no matter how dark things got. And as her shuttle rose through the atmosphere, Kethri looked back at the little blue planet growing smaller below her. She thought of Thomas and his kind eyes. She thought of the mother with her laughing child. She thought of the strangers rushing into burning buildings to save lives. The council wanted answers. They wanted to know what to do about humanity. Kethri knew what she would tell them. She would tell them the truth. The humans were not the enemy. They might just be the best thing the galaxy had ever seen. The Great Hall on Ascendance had never been so quiet. Representatives from every elder species sat in their chambers, their attention fixed on the single figure standing at the center of the room. Ambassador Kethri looked small against the vastness of the space, but her voice carried like thunder. "I went to Earth," she said, "against protocol, against orders. I needed to see them for myself, to understand what the data could not explain." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Elder Vex of the Manthari clicked his mandibles angrily. "You violated the Council's decision. You made unauthorized contact with a primitive species. This is a serious breach of—" "I sat with them," Kethri continued, ignoring the interruption. "I walked their streets. I watched them live their short, beautiful, impossible lives. And I learned something that none of your data ever captured." She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of every representative in the hall. They know they are going to die. Every single one of them. Not just as a species, but as individuals. They are born knowing that their time is limited, that everyone they love will eventually be taken from them, that everything they build will one day crumble into dust. Kethri paused, her voice softened, and they love anyway. They build anyway. They hope anyway. That is not madness. That is courage beyond anything I have ever witnessed. The hall remained silent. Even Vex had stopped his clicking. I watched a human doctor work through the night to save a stranger's life. I watched strangers run into a burning building to rescue people they had never met. I watched an old man sit with his dying wife, holding her hand, telling her stories, making her laugh in her final moments. They do this every day, every single day, all across their world. Humans choose kindness over cruelty, hope over despair, connection over isolation. Kethri walked toward the holographic display of Earth. The blue planet spun slowly, its clouds swirling like painted dreams. Are they violent? Yes. Are they contradictory? Yes. Do they make terrible mistakes? Yes. But they also learn. They grow. They reach for something better even when they fail again and again. That is not a weakness. That is their greatest strength. She turned back to the council. You want to quarantine them because they are dangerous. You are right to be concerned. A species that can create nuclear weapons before achieving unity is terrifying. But you are missing the most important part. They created those weapons and then chose not to use them. They looked at their own destruction and said no. No other species in our records has ever done that. Not one. Morrow of the Silith extended a tentacle toward Kethri. What would you have us do, Ambassador? If not quarantine, then what? Watch them, Kethri said. Learn from them. And one day, when they are ready, welcome them into the galactic community. Not as children to be protected, not as threats to be contained, as equals, as partners, as teachers. The debate that followed lasted 30 cycles. It was the longest discussion in council history. Species that had not spoken to each other in millennia found themselves on the same side. Old alliances shifted, new understandings formed. The question of humanity had done something unprecedented. It had united the council not through fear, but through wonder. In the end, the vote was nearly unanimous. Earth would not be quarantined. It would not be destroyed. It would not be conquered or controlled. It would be watched, studied, respected. The council declared humanity a protected species, not because they were weak, because they were precious. A living answer to questions the galaxy had not known to ask. After the vote, ancient Oryx emerged from the shadows one final time. The last founder moved slowly through the great hall, its form flickering like a dying star. It stopped before the holographic Earth and gazed at the blue planet with eyes that had seen the birth of galaxies. I am old, Oryx said. Older than most of you can comprehend. I have watched civilizations rise and fall like waves upon a shore. I have seen species achieve wonders and commit horrors. I thought I had seen everything. The ancient being paused. When it spoke again, its voice was filled with something like awe. I was wrong. The humans have shown me something new. They have shown me that survival is not about strength or unity or logic. It is about will. The stubborn, irrational, beautiful refusal to give up, even when all hope is lost. Oryx turned to face the council one last time. I am entering my final dormancy. My time is done. But before I go, I will add one last entry to the galactic archives. A warning and a wonder for all species yet to come. The ancient being began to fade. Its light grew dimmer with each passing moment. But its voice remained strong. In the outer spiral arm, there is a world of contradictions. Its people are fragile and fierce, foolish and brilliant, cruel and kind in the same breath. They call themselves human. They have no claws, no venom, no hive mind, no natural armor. They possess only will. Do not underestimate them. They looked upon the darkness of existence, knew it would claim them, and built cathedrals anyway. They stared into the void and called it beautiful. They knew they would die and chose to love anyway. Oryx was almost gone now. Just a faint shimmer in the air. They are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They may not be the wisest, but they may be the most important, because they have mastered the one force no other species has, the refusal to surrender. Approach them with caution. Approach them with respect. And perhaps, approach them with hope. for they have much to teach us all. The light faded. Oryx was gone. The last founder had passed into the eternal sleep. The council sat in silence for a long moment. Then, one by one, they rose and departed. They had witnessed something historic, something that would change the galaxy forever. And far away, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, 7 billion humans went about their lives. They woke up and went to work. They kissed their children goodbye. They argued about politics and worried about money and dreamed about the future. They fell in love and had their hearts broken. They created art and built bridges and discovered cures for diseases. They did not know they were being watched. They did not know that the stars themselves had taken notice. They simply lived. Stubbornly, beautifully, impossibly, somewhere in the cosmic archive, Oryx's final words glowed like a beacon in the darkness, a message for all who would come after. The humans are not a threat, they are a miracle, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Above the Earth, hidden in the shadow of the moon, a single Valorian scout ship maintained its silent vigil. Commander Thelvex stood at the viewport, watching the blue planet turn slowly beneath him. He thought about everything he had learned, everything he had witnessed, everything that had changed since that first day, when his sensors had detected those chaotic radio signals pouring from an unknown world. The humans were still broadcasting. Music and laughter and arguments and prayers, joy and sorrow and everything in between. A symphony of chaos and hope, reaching out into the infinite darkness. Thelvex smiled. He had come here looking for answers. He had found something better. He had found wonder. And as the whisper of stars held its position among the stars, humanity continued its impossible journey, reaching upward, always upward, toward the light, the end.